February 24th regular city council meeting. All rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jody, can I get a roll call, please?
Certainly. Mayor King,
Present.
Councilman Augsburg,
Here.
Councilman Niner,
Here.
Councilman Newberry,
Here.
Councilman Eady.
Here.
Quorum being present. If everyone's had an opportunity to look at the agenda, are there any objections to the agenda as presented?
No.
Hearing no objections, the agenda is approved. Next item is the consent agenda. Are there any objections to the consent agenda as it is presented?
I don't have objections, but I have some questions.
Then we have to open the consent agenda, correct?
You can move to pull one item off if it's a specific one, and then
What
we
item
can
we
bring it
want
into
to pull off?
discussion.
The RNS, I just had questions with the logo and the RNS.
Just make a motion to pull consent agenda item number 2 from the consent agenda and place on the regular agenda.
Do I have a motion to remove the memorandum of understanding on the consent agenda, item number 2?
Yes, I will make a motion to move the memorandum of understanding between Pleasant Hill and RNS to items of consideration.
I'll second.
A motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Removed.
So then now you would need a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes. Next item is public comment. If you would like to address city council about something not on the agenda, you can step up to the podium, please. State your name and address for the record, and I'm going to ask that Superintendent Burke be able to go first.
We'll hold down that button, we'll turn that mic on. Just turn green. Once the screen's good.
We're good? Hi, my name is Wayne Burke. I live at 401 Sugar Land, and I'm also the superintendent of the school district, so I'm very proud of that, and I'm excited to be here to talk to you about an upcoming bond issue. I know that you can read, so I'm not going to read this to you, but there's a few things that I do want to point out to you, if that's okay. Usually whenever anytime a bond comes out, people want to know, what am I getting? First of all, how much is it going to cost? How much is it going to cost me, and what am I getting for my money? And so, just like you have a fiduciary responsibility to your taxpayers, we do as well. And so, we want to maximize what we get for our community and our students, and at the same time, be aware that there is a cost involved. I know that you can read the front page, but I'm going to flip over. And if you don't mind, flip over to the second page. I think everybody should have this if you want to follow along. So exactly what are we getting for $18.4 million? One of the things that we want to do is improve the safety security at the high school. Right now, if you walk up, you can't really get in, but we really don't have eye contact with you. We use a camera. But once you have access to the building, you have full access to the building. We want to change that. We have a similar problem at the primary school, that once you get access to the building, you have full access to the building. So one of the first things that we're looking at is safety and security for our buildings. The middle school, some of you have been here longer than I have, but tornado hit the middle school quite a few years ago. I don't feel like we have a really good storm shelter for the middle school. So we will put in storm shutters that will go in the cafeteria, they will come down. They were made out of steel, and then they will block the windows in the cafeteria area. So we can actually get the whole building into that area and provide for safety. Our alarm system is old, and we want to replace that. So that would be the first part. District-wide improvements, just like everybody else, we want to take care of what we have, but we have some older roofs, and we have old HVAC, and we want to update that. We won't do it all at once, but we'll do it over a 5-year period, and then we'll have an improvement. ADA, you all understand what that is. We have some changes that we need to make, and we need to upgrade. And then we have a few kiddos that We really want to make them have the same opportunities as other kids. So whether it's playgrounds, getting in and out of buildings, whatever it is, we want to fix that. And then just like everybody else, we have some deferred maintenance. At our high school, we have a very strong ag program. Those of you who have, if you've ever been to Friday night and had a barbecue sandwich, our kids make that. And so, but they do a lot through our greenhouse. They grow things and they use it within the building, within the district, and then they turn around and sell it. So we really want to upgrade our greenhouse. And then our culinary arts program, we would really like to redo that and have a full program at the high school. And to be honest, we're going to filter a little bit off and move something into the middle school as well, so that we have programs that sync from one to the other. The activities, athletics, one of the things that we're going to have is a field house. And if you look on page number 3, there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about the field house. It's just like you, I see social media, and there's lots of things that have talked about this field house, and I just want to make a few things straight. Where we would put it is right across the street from the high school stadium, and it would be right there by the softball field. There's a couple of reasons for that. It's a very flat area, and so our football players can use that going in and out, but our softball players can too. Our track and field athletes, our soccer athletes, all of our athletes would have an area that they would be able to do that in. If you will flip over to the next page, and I'm sorry, these are a little bit out of order, but let's go back to the one that kind of looks like this. This is what that area would look like. So there would be a men's locker room, a women's locker room, there would be coach's office, and then there'll be a weight room. And then underneath that is some storage area. So we will have places for that. So we don't have a big indoor facility. I wish we could afford it, but we don't. And I want people to understand this is what this is. The reason the male locker room is bigger is we have 80 to 90 boys that play football, and then they have a lot of equipment. Our largest women's program only has about 30. So we did set this up that in the future, if we needed to expand it, we could expand it. So when you hear about the field house, it's more of a glorified locker room, weight room, and then a storage area. So go back to page 2 if you would. If you've been there on a Friday night, we are the biggest thing in town. We certainly appreciate the police. Chief Wright always comes with his officers, and they hang out with us and make sure that we have a great, safe night. But if you look in the stand, well, let's take away from the stands. If you look around the stands, we have this massive amoeba of kids. And we love the fact that that's the safest place where the kids can be. But sometimes kids get a little rambunctious, and sometimes they, have some exciting times out there. And sometimes people will say to me, why don't you just move them in the stands? If you turn around and look in the stands, our stands will hold about 1,000 people. We really need to make it a little bit bigger. We were hoping to expand to 500. And in doing that, maybe we can move some of our youngest and brightest up into there, and so they can sit in the stands and watch the game and have a good time and be safe. And then stadium lighting. And then last but not least, this is a little controversial, but I want to explain to you what we're going to do. One of the things that we're looking at is transitions. And so right now, we have a primary school, and then we have an elementary school, and then we have an intermediate school, middle school, and then high school. That's a lot of transitions for kids. And we understand that this is the way things have been done for a long time, but at some point we probably need to make an adjustment. And so what we'd like to do is turn the middle school into an actual middle school. It'd be 6, 7, 8. And then we'd take our intermediate school and turn it into a 3, 4, 5. And so what would we do at the elementary? Well, if you look down there, we're going to retrofit that. And so that would turn, and when I say retrofit, basically what we're doing is we're taking it offline. We're not going to get it. We're not going to do anything. I'm hoping, and I'll get to that in a second, I'm hoping that our numbers rebound and that we're able to have more kids, and then we put that school back online and we can do that. So when I talk about a retrofit, it means very minor changes to that building. But we would put our daycare in there, we'd move our central office there, our transportation office, boardroom. One of the things that we've talked about for years is we'd love to have an alternative school, but we just don't have a place for it. And so I've had quite a few people say, well, why? Why do you need all that? If you will flip over to, I believe it's the 4th page, and it says total population. When I first came here, I was a little concerned about our student population, and it had me worried. And people assured me that we weren't losing students. Let me take a second. If you see 2 numbers there, if you were to call the state of Missouri and just say, what is the population of the Pleasant Hill School District on on such and such year, you may get two different answers because one of the answers will be with pre-K and one is without. And so in order to get rid of the confusion, I have put both on there. But if you notice, 2021, we were right at 2,500 kids. Right now, this year, we have 2,120. And so we're losing some kids. I have lots of ideas and theories on that. And it's one of those things that we're going to work hard to get as many of our kids back as we can. But let's be honest, our population as a city is probably getting a little older, and we don't have as many starter homes as we used to. My son and my son-in-law and my daughter just bought a house, and I know what they paid for a starter home, and that was pretty expensive. We just don't have as many of those around here. And I'm not being critical, I'm just saying, let's just be honest. That's part of what it is. We're losing some kids to homeschool, and then sometimes people just move and they move to the city or they move wherever. But with that total population, we have to make some changes so that we can figure out a way to survive, and hopefully we will rebound. I know that more building is coming on. I know that we're doing some things with Pride Chopper. I know there's going to be houses built. And at that point, I'm hoping we rebound. When that happens, we can take the elementary school and put it right back online and work with that. But I do want to make sure that we just have an honest conversation about, we are losing some kids, and we really need to make sure that we make a decision on that. If you look at the very back page, and I apologize, I know you guys have a busy agenda and I'm going through this very fast, but if you look at the back page, please look at the top left-hand corner first. It says draft and it says possible solution. So we've not committed to anything, but these are some things that we talked about. We could possibly put an alternative school there. We could have some daycare space. We would put the central office up there. Transportation, we would move them. And then if you notice, we are leaving the gym alone because I know that the activities programs in the city uses our gym, and we're going to leave it alone. We want that to be available to it. And then we have a new cafeteria area, and we can use that for professional development, or basically, if the community needs somewhere to meet, we can do that as well. So again, nothing's being getting rid of, nothing's been lost, other than we're just taking it offline. Now, eventually we might, if this continues, we might sell the district office, and then whatever money that we make from the district office will roll back into those renovations. And so that is kind of it in a nutshell. Tax cost, project cost is 18.4 million. This is a no tax rate increase. And I always hate when people say, well, it's a no tax rate increase, because if the value of your house goes up, then you look at your taxes and it says, well, I paid more this year than I paid last year. What we're saying is we are not going to change our tax rate. So if you look consistently last 7 years in a row, we have stayed at the same tax rate. We're guaranteeing that we're going to continue that same tax rate. So again, I had somebody say, well, you said, well, you're not going to raise taxes. We're not going to raise the tax rate. If the assessed valuation goes up, that's good for you. That means your house or your home or your property is worth more, but I can't do anything about that. So I know I'm a fast talker, and I apologize. Do you have questions? And I guess what I'm saying is, first of all, we appreciate the city. We really enjoy working with you. I know that Shelby and Nikki, and I should probably say it more professionally, but they're always good. Anytime that we need anything, they call us, we talk to them, they call them, we work together. Obviously, Chief Wright, we do a lot with him. Jeff Hall, I know that Mike Clevenger speaks very, very highly of Mr. Hall. And so, and my feeling is we need to have a really good symbiotic relationship. What's good for the city is good for the district. What's good for the district is good for the city. And so we just ask you to support it in however way that you feel comfortable with supporting us. And with that, I will stand for any questions. I don't know how long I talked, but I try to be quick.
Any questions from council? All right, well, thank you. I appreciate you coming and
Thank you,
talking to
Mayor. I
us tonight.
appreciate it. I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, anyone else like to address council? Well, before we get to the next item, Councilwoman Newberry, you had questions about the MOU?
Yes. Can you just dumb it for me? Can you dumb it down for me so I understand it?
Yes,
I think I do, but I just want to make
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I'll be able to.
So our charge from council was to formalize the verbal agreement that we had. As the city hasn't financially contributed to the logo, the design of the logo, it still remains, that base logo that doesn't say city of, still remains the intellectual property of the designer. So the only portion that we're gonna take responsibility for is the one that says city of, and then any of the options that we may say, that may say Parks and Rec, or Development Services, Human Resources,
That all belongs.
that all belongs to us.
Okay.
And so it says, that they're licensed exclusively to use. We have the rights to adjust, on our own if we wanted to. We don't always have to go back to the designer. And we don't need the designer's changes or approval for us to make those changes, as long as it's to the city's logo. And so it says that we both agree to not interfere with each other's use of those two things.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So the first item for consideration tonight is the annual MoDOT grant application for hazardous movement violations.
So Mayor, you would still then need to, if everybody's okay or what, a motion would need to be made on that item because it was removed from the consent agenda, so it has not actually been now authorized by council.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the MOU between City of Pleasant Hill and RNS Creative?
I'll make a motion, right?
I'll second.
I have a motion to approve the MOU. I have a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Augsburg,
Yes.
Councilwoman Niner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Newberry,
Yes.
Councilwoman Nema.
Yes.
All right. So the annual MoDOT grant application for hazardous moving violations grant.
That's your turn.
Yeah, so, I shouldn't introduce anyway. This is our annual, one of our annual grants that we applied for. This, particular grant is for hazardous moving violations. It will pay for officer overtime, it will pay for some professional development and some equipment. I'd like to note that in the equipment, we are looking at getting some, permanently affixed solar-powered speed signs that can be deployed. We've asked for 4 with this grant. We'd like to deploy them at strategic areas to help complement our speed trailer that we have now.
So if you guys have never seen them, they're basically if these are the same ones that go up on the speed limit signs, and they do the same thing as the trailer does. All right. So do I have what are you getting the motion for, just to proceed with the grant?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion to allow the chief right to proceed with the annual MoDOT grant application for hazardous moving violations?
I'll make a motion for Chief Wright to proceed with the annual MoDOT grant application for hazardous moving violation grant.
I will second.
Motion, a second, roll call, please.
Councilman Augsburg,
Yes.
Councilwoman Niner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Newberry,
Yes.
Councilwoman Nema.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item is the annual MoDOT DWI enforcement grant.
This is another one of our annual grants that we apply for. This one specifically covers overtime for officers to work DWI enforcement.
Any questions from council? Should have done the last one. Any comments from the public? All right, do I have a motion to give approval for Chief Wright to apply for the MoDOT DWI enforcement grant?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to apply for the annual MoDOT DVI enforcement grant.
I'll second.
Have a motion in 2 seconds. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Augsburg,
Yes.
Councilwoman Niner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Newberry,
Yes.
Councilwoman Nema.
Yes.
Thank you all.
All right. We have a special events application for the Optimus Club Circus.
I will be taking that. As you know, every 2 years, the Optimus Club puts on the circus that helps pay for their expenses for the next 2 years. This is their main fundraiser that they have. They would like to host this again at the Cass County Fairgrounds on September 6th, with setup being the evening of September 5th. Everything would be the same as it has been in years past. They would, this would include all of the parking area. The tent would be placed on the south portion of the property. They would need access to water and electricity as they have in the past. They are also requesting no fee charged for the use of the facilities.
Any questions from council? All right, any comments from the public? All right, need a motion to accept the special events application as presented.
I'll make a motion to accept the special application as accepted, or as presented, excuse me.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Augsburg,
Yes.
Councilman Niner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Newberry,
Yes.
Councilwoman Emo.
Yes.
All right, item number, I guess it's not number 6 anymore. A residential chicken fee discussion.
At the last meeting, you guys had the conversation about residential chickens, and we left it open regarding whether there would still be, whether to impose a fee or not. And so I'm just bringing this one back up for your discussion. So Mayor, I'll give it to you.
All right. So the first question would be, do we want to charge a fee, yes or no?
Yes.
Councilwoman Newberry.
I'm gonna say yes.
I'm still saying no.
Okay.
Yes.
No.
All right. I guess for this discussion, we need a vote then to proceed one way or the other, correct?
I mean, you don't have to yet. As this goes into effect on March 31st, you do still have 2 meetings before that. It's just been, as we've been communicating, like right now it just says more information to come, or council's, this is still pending, council's decision on whether a fee would be enforced or not. You don't have to take action tonight if you don't want to.
Okay. If there was a fee, what are we thinking for the fee?
I thought we said $6
Okay.
per household.
I just
That's
wanna make
what
sure
we
that's
discussed
where
at
we
the
were.
last one.
If there was a fee, you would want the fee to be 0? Since you said no.
Yeah, I just don't see the reason for a fee. I mean, I just,
I want it registered, I don't care whether there's a fee or not, but I want them registered.
I'm perfectly fine with this waiting for a little bit. Maybe we could have some more discussion about it.
This would be the time to have it. So, I would also be willing to entertain having a registration for them, not having a fee for the first year and starting collections of a fee next year at the $6. I don't. How many dog licenses are there?
We got that email.
I know. I'm looking at Amy to see if she remembers, otherwise I'll have.
Right now, I have about 35, I believe, 35 for what year?
Which started January.
Yes, it starts January 1st. Typically, we probably have around 50 or 60.
68 is the number I heard for last year. So, how many dogs do we think there are?
A lot more than that.
More than that.
Exactly.
Same way with cats. Every time somebody gets a different cat, a new cat, you don't come in and register it.
I think, go ahead, Augie.
I'd be okay with having them register this year and then starting a small fee next year. It gives them an opportunity to try it, don't like it, get out of it, don't worry.
I would be okay with that.
Chief Wright, can I put you on the spot for a minute?
Yes,
I mean, you
sir.
can say no.
I'm good, go ahead.
What is the value of continuing registration of dogs and cats and
For-
chickens?
First and foremost, with dogs and cats, it's an opportunity for us to gather their information that they have received the vaccinations that they need. So it's a public safety issue. Secondly, whenever we do find an animal that's lost or has wandered off, that's one of the first places that we consult is that registry. Obviously, compliance with the law isn't great. There's ways that we can make that happen, but it's not going to be favorable for anybody that's elected if we do those things. And that's going door to door and making people register. Never a good applicant situation. With chickens, I think it'll also give us the opportunity to be able to at least have a starting place of where these chickens come from. Now, chickens are a bit different than dogs and cats because there's going to be a chicken coop in the backyard. We hope it's in the backyard. But registration would help us streamline that process of not having to go around and look when we can call dispatch and say, who's got chickens registered in that area. Either way, we will get through this with a few bumps in the road, but this will all be fine. I'm good either way, with or without a registration, and with or without a fee.
How? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I do like your rationale on the registration for the chickens, cause let's just say you got some chickens running around my neighborhood, it kinda gives you a window where to narrow it down where they're coming from, so.
It gives us a starting point without having to drive around and try to peer at every backyard in the area.
I like that.
What, and it's way off topic, what can we do to bolster registration for pets without being intrusive?
Well, I think that an education campaign would help, but I think if you look across the area, and this is not the first place that I've been the chief that has a registration for dogs and cats, it's the same everywhere. You're going to get some people that comply with the law, you're gonna get some people that wanna comply, they just don't make it in here on time while City Hall's open. There's some things that we could do that potentially would help, maybe have some weekend type registration processes early in the year or in springtime. We can push some more information out through social media and other things. But I don't think that we'll ever, I think I'd be remiss if I stood here and told you that we would get 100% compliance. It's just not gonna happen. Every city goes through this struggle.
I have since the beginning of the year tried to push it more on social media and the website as well as in the newsletters. On social media, we did get a little bit of backlash because they didn't understand why they had to do that, but then people were coming in more that week and we heard, oh, it's only $6, that's not a big deal at all. So, I mean, we saw both sides of the spectrum.
Additionally, one of the things I have charged staff with is creating, honestly, over the past year, our web forms now have the ability to include attachments. They have the ability to make payments as well. And so we are working on that. Particularly, we are looking at it for chickens, but we can also transfer that over to dogs and cats, making it more tech friendly.
Shelby and I have discussed that, and I think that so many people do business online now that I really think that it would be a good idea for us to go to an online registration where they can put the documents and everything else in there. So I think that will help us some.
I think probably another area that maybe would help is when people come to City Hall to start water service, that we give them information about the other things that can be done. I don't know, maybe you already do that or not, but
Oh, that's it.
because I'll be honest with you, I had lived in this community for 16 years before I knew that you had to have your dogs registered. Nobody had ever said anything. Had never seen any information on it. So I think that would help tremendously. I lean towards of having a registry, having them register for their backyard chickens. I think that we probably still have a little ways to go before we see a turn in the bird flu, and we're going to continue to see shortages. So that's why I was thinking of maybe getting this started, not charging the first year, making sure people know that next year when they redo it, that it is going to have a fee. And then also pushing that message. So, is that the guidance you need to proceed?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Any comments from the public?
John Self, 205 South Campbell. Thinking about the woman who was asking about things that we could do to reduce her water rates. Thinking maybe charge a fee if they have more than 1 or 2 chickens, but the little lady that has a chicken in the back so she doesn't have to buy eggs, maybe she gets a break-on fee. I know it's only $6 a year, but it's still $6. We don't have to charge everybody, but I do like the idea of having registered animals. Also might remind people that if their animal is registered and it's picked up by animal control is going to know how to get a hold of the owner to restore that family member, and that might incentivize people to register their animals.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I got something to say. Marla Largent, 1908 Cypress Way. I don't like you charging these people in this town. We don't all live in Sugar Land. I mean, I for years delivered presents to the kids in this town who can't afford a gallon of milk, and you're going to charge them to have chickens in their backyard so they can have eggs. That's ridiculous.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marla.
Anyone else? All right. Next item is the fiscal year 2026 recommended budget presentation and discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. You guys are gonna bear with me for a while because we're going through the whole rest of the budget. At the last meeting, we talked about the water and sewer fund, and you'll see tonight why we talked about that one is it is a really significant part of our budget. But we're gonna go through everything else and a lot of the funds combined, including the water and wastewater and some of the aggregate information you're gonna see. So the fiscal year 2026 proposed budget, as we've mentioned previously, goes into effect, if you guys pass it, April 1st. So our fiscal year begins April 1st and runs through March 31st. The recommended budget is $26.8 million, which is a 61.5% increase. That is in large part attributable to the P1, P2, and P3 bond projects and other capital projects that are underway that will carry forward to fiscal year 2026. On average, otherwise, I think it's our normal operating would probably have been around 13 million. So it's half of the budget is really in those large capital projects. All funds combined, the city has an unrestricted fund balance of $1.3 million, or we project that we will at the end of the year, representing 17% of the overall expenses. And it meets the city's minimum requirement for an 8% fund balance. The budget proposes no changes to staffing. We still have 46 full-time employees plus additional part-time and seasonal employees included in this budget. Just for fun, I wanted to go back and look at fund balance trends. There's a whole bunch of lines on this chart, but really looking at the past 10 years, the bigger green bar is all of our funds combined, because we do look at each. We have 15 separate and distinct funds, but then we do kind of aggregate them, all funds combined. How much do we have available in fund balance? Fund balance effectively is cash on hand, and what we're looking at here is unrestricted, meaning it's not committed to any other project, doesn't have to be held back. It's really your reserve. Sometimes people call it a rainy day fund. That's how much we have to continue operations if by chance we didn't receive any of the revenues. What you can see is that it has increased over time, and honestly, it's as a percentage of expenses. So as expenses increase, then that number goes down. And so if you exclude those $13 million worth of capital projects that are in this year's budget, that fiscal year 2026 number is closer to that 30%. Actually, I think it exceeds 30%. And I'm saying all of that with the fact that whenever your fund balances are healthy, then it gives us the opportunity to reallocate funds whenever we need to. And so that's what we've really taken that strategy and approach over the last, especially the last 3 budget years, if by chance, we don't spend as much in a budget in one year, you'll see us reallocate it into the next year, because our fund balances are really at a point that we feel like it's important enough to make sure that we're making good to the taxpayers and investing back in our services and our assets. So all of that to say, we actually are investing more into our services than we were before, and our fund balances are still better. So then I wanted to go through, really starting at the higher level, a little bit more of the fun stuff, our fiscal year 2026 capital expenses, but then also looking at our one-time expenses as well. So recommended in this budget are a number of key initiatives and projects. And these are in addition to continuation and completion of the P1, 2, and 3 budgets. So the first one is a targeted industry analysis. So last year, the City Council had expressed an intent in economic development. I remember especially Councilwoman Niner saying, when are we gonna look at this? We began that initiative in this budget year. We met with a consultant, talked about really what the best strategy was. And in reality, the bond projects took too much of our staff demand for us to be able to add that one on. But the strategy that we had talked about was a targeted industry analysis. And that evaluates the data regarding our economic base and our strengths, our opportunities and our barriers, develops a positioning strategy based on industry trends, looks at hot markets that may capitalize on our strengths, and identifies goals, priority planning, and a strategy development for us to do that. So included in this budget, I'm recommending utilization of general fund money for that targeted industry analysis. The second one is a housing study, and interesting that Dr. Burke also kind of brought this one up in his presentation. So the Kansas City region was recently announced as one of the top 10 hot new housing markets, both according to Zillow and independently also to the National Association of Realtors. The KC market is showing, and it follows data that we've seen, that the Kansas City housing market is underdeveloped over the past 10 years. The number of people that are moving here and the housing that has been constructed isn't enough to keep up with demand. And so what it has done is it has really caused a squeeze on affordable housing. That's why we have seen housing rates increase as much as they possibly have. And so whenever that demand is high, the home prices and both, I guess, that increases and affordability kind of decreases. And so the housing study assesses the housing market, but it also provides recommendations of the type of homes that are needed in this community, the number that would be needed into the future, and at what price points they're needed in the community. And we believe that this is really valuable data that we could help position ourselves really well to some real estate developers where we've done some of the market research for them and said, this is what we need in the community. Especially with the Pleasant Hill Marketplace project that's happening and the potential for that area to open up to the north, we felt like this was a good first step to position ourselves for what is the future of the housing market in Pleasant Hill. Also, that one would be funded out of the general fund. The third thing that is included in this budget is a wayfinding and signage improvement. And this one really just kind of ended up being a convergence of a whole lot of things that just seemed to make sense this year. Signage along 7 Highway has been important to the park board at least since 2020. And they really wanted, I guess, signage to the parks was their initial goal. We've done some of them on city streets and weren't able to get them done on 7 Highway. Part of the reason was MoDOT standards, and we thought it still had to be what I'll call a street-looking sign. Within the last probably month, I have received guidance on what those decorative signs could look like along 7 Highway. We know Harrisonville has them, Liberty has them. They can be prettier than a typical street sign. So we now have those standards. Additionally, we have a plan in here to replace approximately 1/3 of the street signs throughout town. So that would be the street name signs, stop signs, it could be the speed limit signs. That is something that we already have included in the budget. But one of the questions that Tony asked me was, do you have a preference on what color, what feel they have, what the font is? And so this wayfinding has the ability to actually at one time pull all of this together And the park board, we know this is still an important project to them, especially with the opening of the new parks. We have found some designs that we really love, and I'm just gonna give this as context for everyone. Whenever I looked at the plans that we really liked and pulled up the contracts from that city, for a total of 11 signs and the design, that city paid over $250,000. Yeah, $250,000 was not gonna work in our budget, just so you guys know. So we did scale it back to, we allocated $50,000 for that wayfinding signage. And so that would include what we believe that we can accomplish with design, engineering. It would have all of the plan specs for how all of those street signs need to be set. And then also that would be for construction as well. So, and I'm anticipating probably 4 signs along 7th Highway. It's kind of what I'm thinking. I do have a meeting tomorrow with the engineer in which I'm gonna see if we can make that work. The other one is there's additional funding for park improvements. We do have a placeholder of $20,000 for improvements, and or he could choose equipment replacement or purchase, or any purchases to maintain the existing parks. It has an allocation for improvements to the campsites at Brown's Arm, also included in this budget as well. Then we have money set aside in this budget for public safety investments. So this one is going to be for police equipment. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. So not all of our police cars are equipped fully with rifles either. And so it rounds out the program and makes sure that we have rifles for every vehicle. And then additionally, even though we did purchase a drone last year, we are asking for funding for a smaller drone that can get into tighter spaces. So it would be both systems would still be in place. This budget also includes funding for public work facility improvements. This would be a lot of interior and exterior work at the public workshop on VV. Part of that includes a renovation of the break room, which can serve as a training room and an emergency response location, and it can facilitate overnight accommodations for our employees if needed. And we've already seen them do that with some of the stuff we've already done there. Additionally, this budget does include funding for a replacement jetter or vac truck for the sewer, sanitary sewer and storm sewer system. It includes funding for building improvements. I already mentioned the ones at Public Works. It includes the 3rd year of an allocation for the fitness room that is at the police department, a minimal amount of additional funding for that one, and then reallocates funding in this budget year for City Hall roof replacement. And the final one that I have on this one is the continued maintenance priorities that we already have in place. So it does still continue to provide funding for street preservation methods, sidewalks, stormwater, curbing, and our IT infrastructure. So then breaking this out, even though the budget is displayed in the information that you guys see in this larger packet, everything is broken out into those 15 separate and distinct funds. But years ago, the council said, I want to see this by department. I want to see how much the departments are truly in charge of, regardless of what fund it's paid out of. And so this is only on capital alone. In this budget, the Parks and Facilities Department will oversee $5.7 million worth of projects. So what I did was in this slide, I went ahead and listed them all out and which fund they are paid out of, in case you wanted to go back and try to find where they were. But within Parks and Facilities, so some of this is going to get a little repetitive. That would be City Hall roof replacement, the Brown's Arm campsite upgrades, wayfinding signage. We do have a regular allocation for just buildings and grounds improvements. So just repairs that may come up. I know that they have plans to replace some HVAC units within our existing facilities. That's what that line's for. And then obviously in the GO bond, we have the rec complex upgrades, City Park, City Lake. And then I've put this one under Parks and Facilities, but we do have in the Special Events Fund some money set aside for fairgrounds improvements. Then police doesn't usually have this much, especially not in capital. But next year, in the fiscal year 2026 budget, the police department will have under their responsibility $4.6 million worth of capital improvements. As I mentioned before, that's the police equipment, the fitness room, but really the larger dollar amounts are going to be in the animal shelter construction and police station renovation. And I will note that the GO bonds for P1, 2, and 3, we do have completely fully anticipated to be expended by the end of fiscal year 2026. So that $16 million improvement will be completely, we think, wrapped up by the end of this budget year. Within Public Works, we are anticipating about $3.2 million worth of improvements. That would include city parking lot paving. That's a carried over project for the 2nd Street lot. Facility improvements, actually, in order to make it work, we're having the general fund contribute a little bit to the interior renovation, capital improvement, sales tax fund, transportation fund, and water and sewer fund. So everybody got to share the wealth fund. The funding for equipment, sidewalk replacements, water system improvements, wastewater system improvements, street preservation, curbing. We have reallocated transportation engineering. It's something we had set aside previously. We know that Walker Road is going to be one of them, but we really wanted to pair this up with some of our water and wastewater infrastructure projects to make sure that maybe at the same time that we're redoing the lines, it would make sense to do the street at the same time. And so we're not certain 100% where all of that is going to go. We do know that Walker is going to be one of them. And then as I mentioned, there is an allocation within the transportation fund to replace what we believe is approximately 1/3 of the street signs in town. So those are the big 3 departments that consume the largest amount of the capital budgets. And there's only one other capital item, which is $10,000 for computer replacements and upgrades throughout any department of the city. But I did want to note those one-time expenses that we had mentioned, and then a couple others that are in there, really mostly funded out of the general fund. So the ones that I haven't mentioned, I did set aside some funding for a council retreat. And part of that is the council has been really good in the past couple of years telling us what the future looks like. And this budget is reflective of those conversations. And I wanted to make sure that we had an allocation in there that we could have that conversation about what does the next future look like after this, because it would be a really good time to start planning for what comes next. We did go ahead and set aside some additional money for groundbreaking and ribbon cuttings. Those are things that don't live within the bond, but we wanted to make sure they were great experiences for anybody whenever we reopen our parks and facilities as well. We have funding in there for a police accreditation process and then some office furniture replacements as well. Questions on capital? Okay, so then looking at fund summaries and highlights, and I apologize, that's really tiny on the screen, so I'm gonna have to talk through this one. So really just the pie chart of whenever we look at the budget, we break them into 5 kind of fund categories. Even though they still operate as 15 separate and distinct funds, we really look at them in terms of general fund style funds. Then we have debt, we have other special revenue, and that's about 6 different funds. And then we have capital, which includes 4 funds, and then water and sewer is its own standalone fund. So this year in aggregate, capital, which is the purple, is 40% of this year's budget. As you can tell, major investments that's going to skew things. Water and sewer, which is the lighter blue of this pie chart, is approximately 30% of the budget. The 3 general funds represent almost 20%, that's the darker blue, and then debt and the remaining special revenue bonds represent just a little over 10% of the remaining budget. Now, I will tell you, if we didn't have these large capital budgets, this chart looks very different. Really, water, sewer, and general fund then comprise 75% of our budget, just for context. Okay, I told myself I'm not gonna read a whole bunch of numbers, so it's up there that you guys can read it if you want to. But kind of broken into those major categories, I did provide a list of revenue, expenses, and then what those nets are between both of them. So all funds, the revenue that is expected to be generated is $13.3 million. The expenses is $26.8 million. And so while those numbers look alarming because each one of them look like they have a draw on fund balances, don't worry, because I would typically be the one to be worried, and we'll go through why not to be as worried about that. That's because most of it's a result of bonds. And additionally, we have previously authorized carryover and utilization of restricted fund balances. And so this is a budget for me that had a little bit more breathing room. You've heard me say this probably for the past 2 budget years. Each year it's starting to get a little bit easier for us operationally to be able to fit in what we need to do. Is it perfect? No, it's still not perfect. We still could use additional funding for street overlay, for sidewalks, for curbing, but we know that kind of what the base is that we need to put into the budget every year. We're not scrambling to find hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue or cuts to expenses in order to fund those things. So almost $12 million of that is attributable to the bond. 800,000 of it was that previously authorized carryover. So what that previously authorized carryover means is it's in this year's budget. We just didn't get it finished yet. And we said, it'll be in next year's. We just moved it over. Utilization of restricted funds. So I mentioned earlier that each of those funds have a restricted balance and then an unrestricted. Restricted meaning it was set aside for a specific purpose. So this year we anticipate using $542,000 of restricted funds, making them into unrestricted and available to be spent. And then, and let me note what most of that is, just, I forgot about that part. So a majority of that, this one's a little more confusing, is that Dogwood Energy pays us a payment in lieu of taxes, and they sell portions of their plant. So we were on a schedule in which we were gonna receive regular revenue on an ongoing basis. Whenever they sell it, it all comes at once. We've been holding that aside to allocate into the budget according to that older schedule. That's what that restricted fund is. And then additionally, then $262,000 is draw of fund balance for other reasons. So that could be because we did need it a little bit on an operational basis, or it could be for a lot of those one-time uses that I mentioned previously. Okay, so questions on that? I know that part maybe a little confusing. Okay, so looking at revenue, as I mentioned, it is $13.3 million. The largest portion I think people may be shocked to see is in the purple, and that's charges for services. Since a large portion of our budget, especially our revenues, comes from the water and sewer fund, that's what charges for services are. There are other funds that have some charges for services, but not to the level that you'll see in water and sewer. So nearly half of the money that we receive in our entire budget comes from water and sewer rates, notably the utility connections. Sales tax, which is in the green, accounts for nearly 20% of all revenues whenever I'm looking at all the funds together. And property taxes, which is the brighter blue, darker blue, is about 15% of our revenues. And those 3 items alone comprise 81% of total revenues received. So then I kind of broke that down into our 3 largest revenue generating funds. So as I mentioned, water sewer is pretty much all charges for services. Then general fund, you get a little bit more diversification. So in the general fund, it's expected to generate $3.2 million. Sorry, I'm gonna back up. Water sewer fund, I forgot to mention, was $5.8 million. Okay, general fund was $3.2 million. And again, people may be shocked to see fees and permits are the largest generator within the general fund. And that's primarily franchise fees on utilities that is in those fees and permit line. That's going to be the lighter blue. Then the next largest generator will be sales taxes, which is the brighter green. And then, I'm guessing my third one is property taxes, which is gonna be that darker blue. I do wanna bring to council's attention, we still continue to see reductions in some of those franchise fees. Some franchise fees, fee collections are steadily increasing, primarily on electric and gas collections. But we are over time, we have seen a dwindling of the fees collected on telecommunications charges as people have moved from landlines to cell phones and cable providers. We've seen that decline in cable because streaming services aren't subject to this the way that cable was. And so, I bring that up because that is something that in the state legislature regularly gets traction. It's something that every city regularly advocates for because that is a declining revenue source and one that we'll eventually have to make up. Now, the good news is the cable franchise fee generates about $50,000 out of that. So it's not a huge amount, but we do have to be on the alert of what are other revenue streams that can help offset that. We are projecting a conservative 0.6% increase to sales tax over what we project the year-end number to be this year. I think that's a little conservative, but I'm kind of waiting to see what our collection will be in March before I maybe make an adjustment to that. Property taxes, also I think we're being a little conservative on that, on a 2% increase from this year's estimate. Over the last 3 to 5 years, whenever I was looking at property taxes, the average increase was about 4% in our collection. But we've seen that slow in the last 2 years, and we're still not certain, and I think we'll know a little bit better this year what that senior property tax freeze is going to do to that collection. So we kept it a little bit lower than what we've seen as historical collections. And then the third largest revenue generating fund will be the transportation fund. A lot of these revenue sources are gonna be the same. They receive over 2/3 of their revenue from both sales taxes and then statewide gas taxes. That's 1/3 that they receive from the city sales tax, and a majority of the remainder are either state distributions of sales and gas taxes that are collected at the state level and distributed back to cities on a per capita basis. And even that remaining 15% for other in this lighter green color, oh, you can't see my mouse either. Yeah, she can move hers over there. In the lighter green, even that is comprised of countywide distribution shares of property taxes and sales taxes. So the money that goes into the transportation fund is really sales tax, property tax, and statewide gas tax. Okay, so then on the expense side, there are a couple different ways that I like to slice and dice the data here. And so the first one is looking at budgeting categories. And so I break them into 4 different categories: personnel, operating, capital, and debt. Obviously, again, there's a lot of capital in this budget. So the fiscal year 2025 budget is in the red. The fiscal 2025 estimate is in the kind of beige color, and then the proposal for fiscal year 2026 is in the blue bar. Personnel, pretty much on track with where we were within the budget. We're expecting a 4% increase over the 25 budget. Operating, we are seeing a 7% increase from the fiscal year 2025 budget, and then obviously capital has a much larger amount. Breaking out the expenses by department. Now, this does not include debt. So the total expense without debt is $25 million, really split almost equally between Public Works, Police, and Parks and Facilities. Again, that would look different whenever we take out capital, and I'll show you. The next one is the expenses by department taking out the capital. Then Public Works really takes a majority of it. They're then 42% of the budget. Admin then is 27.6%, police at 18%, parks and facilities at 10%. Continuing looking at it by department. So earlier we went over just capital within each department. This is all of those 3 categories: personnel, operating, and capital together. So the police department typically has a bulk of their expenses in general fund personnel. The fiscal year 2026 budget is nearly the same as the fiscal year 2025 estimate, with the exception of capital, again, for the animal shelter and police station projects. And the department is expected to contribute to $6.7 million of the city's budget. The Public Works Department really primarily is going to span the water sewer fund and transportation funds whenever you're looking at the budget. And they typically do have a bulk of their expenses in operating and capital, with a much smaller allocation to personnel. Their operating expenses, the reason that it's larger is it includes large ticket items like purchase of water and payments for sewer treatment. They also have to pay for street lighting, and then there's that engineering and professional fees in there as well. Capital expenditures include improvements back into the system, street overlay, and the things we discussed before. So the Public Works Department is responsible for $7.8 million of the city's budget. Now, you can see from this one and how different capital is from operating. The Parks and Facilities budget overall, that department has a much smaller budget compared to the other departments. They typically receive less than $2 million. However, the large capital expenditures in the past 2 years for the park improvements have this department responsible for $7 million worth of expenses in the next budget year. Otherwise, personnel and operating expenses are on pace with the previous year. Getting even smaller, Development Services has a budget of $300,000. It's the smallest of the budgeted expenses by department, and a majority of them are in personnel. The department overall, if you look at the total, has a decline in their budget, and that's due to reductions in operating and capital expenses relating to specific projects within their department. And the final one, and we're nearing the end, is the administration budget. The administration budget is primarily operating and personnel based. Administrative expenses include what I'll call more back-end global organizational operations, and also includes utility billing. This includes the trash service contract, building utilities, workers' compensation, property and liability insurance for a number of the departments, payroll and hiring expenses, financial software, annual financial audit, IT services are all in this, and also the Cass County Fair is included in this administrative because it just didn't make sense to put in anybody else's department because it's a little bit more global. The expenses did rise slightly in fiscal year 2025 due to the cost of issuance with the GO bond, and otherwise expenses are expected to remain relatively stable, averaging about a 4.5% increase for personnel and operating. I titled this one Next Steps, but it's really the ponderables on my mind before we get to that part. There are a few other projects that are on my mind and worthy of funding or future planning, and I included them in my memo that's in the packet as well. One of them is the MOPAC Phase 3B trail improvements. So MOPAC Phase 3B is on the Grays Point side of City Lake. We've done the engineering for it, and we still have a need to construct that trail and really see a need for a certain timeline. Again, as we all start to prep towards the World Cup, it would be great if we did it. Basically, there's a blind curve at that area, and then it would be great if we could ultimately get them off to make it through those curves. We do still have money within the restricted fund balance in the general fund that I think could be contributed towards that project if we felt like that was worthy of it. And that was really some CARES Act money that we were holding on to. We had received the reimbursement, and I was kind of waiting for an audit period because they changed guidance at the very end, and I'm questioning if they were going to hold to that guidance. But now we're multiple years removed from that CARES Act that I think an audit would have occurred by now. We did the same thing with KCMO Water years ago, that we had something that we were kind of holding on to just in case an audit came. So that money, it's about $200,000 that could be freed up if desired. The other one is the City Lake Dam project. We did receive a quote for what I'm going to call the next phase of engineering. And it was more than I thought this budget can handle at this point. Right now, we don't see an urgent need to do any of that work on it, so it's still sitting out there, and I think that quote was like $160,000. Yeah, so we're still, like, it's one that we'll have to think about, but I don't have it included in this one. Additionally, I think we all in this room know that there's still a need for additional funding needed for street and sidewalk preservation. And I'll even add curbs into that, more than the pace that we're currently funding. And the third one is, maybe actually more than that, and fairgrounds improvements. The one that we've specifically been talking about are replacement bleachers at the rodeo arena. It's something, one, replacement of the bleachers as we need to make some replacements. But then two, we were talking about, is there an opportunity for some expansion at the fairgrounds? The more I've really sat with this one, we do have a quote on how much that would be. Our estimate is $300,000 for the south side bleachers. That increases seating capacity by, I don't know if you have an official number, but I'm estimating by 1/3 of what the seating capacity would be there. So it has the ability to generate additional revenue if we were able to do it. I would actually recommend not to utilize any of the other fund balances, but to issue a certificate of participation, which is effectively an asset-backed loan. And it gets paid back through revenues that are received. You have to have a revenue source to be able to pay it back. And we think that we'll have that availability to repay it from increased proceeds or revenue received from the Cass County Fair in future years. So it's not included in there, but it's one that is out there for your consideration. And then I think on just another ongoing need that we see out there are ongoing enhancements to the park system. It's no secret in this community that last year we put a use tax on the ballot in April. It did not pass, but there is still a need. If we want to maintain things better than we have historically, we still need the revenue sources to do it. And so that is one, as we see consumer behavior change, it's a way for us to capture tax dollars locally. But on the positive, some of the council members, which actually may just be Mayor King and Councilmember Augsburg, may remember that in 2022 we did an unfunded needs exercise. So we listed a whole bunch of things that were on staff's mind, on council's mind of, we would like to see these things funded. And what I did with everyone was we did a blind ranking exercise. And I say blind only because we didn't include budget numbers attached to it. We weren't going to be limited by the amount of money that each one cost. And there are still approximately 20 of those items that remain unfunded. However, I consider it a success that that we're over halfway through that list since 2020, like 2 years ago, three years ago. So we've been able with that list to put them into this budget and make good on some of those improvements that we really needed to make. So that one makes me really happy. So we do have other options, other things that could be funded if you guys want to, but as you can see, we are, dipping into some of those fund balances, so I didn't feel comfortable recommending a budget to you guys that included more than what was listed. And with that, I present, this is the fiscal year 2026 recommended budget. And as the next steps, on March 24th, we will hold the official rate hearing for the water and sewer rates. There will be a public hearing, and then probably at that meeting you will adopt the budget. But at least by April 1st, we will need a budget adoption. We don't have to have any action tonight. We can have any discussion you want. You can ask for any clarifications. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
When do you feel that you will have, I don't want to say finalized, but the budget in a pretty good form?
This is pretty close to final form that you'll see. There were a couple things, honestly, in the past 2 to 3 days that have come up where we've gotten a little bit more information. The three items that came out, honestly, in the last couple days have been, one of them is, and the mayor told me to do this one and I totally forgot, so it was on me. So we always budget money for the next year's 4th of July fireworks display. So for 2025, the budget you see includes the 2025 fireworks. The mayor had said he wanted to do the 2026 4th of July in bigger fashion as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. And we failed to put in additional money in this year's budget because we are hearing that we need to secure fireworks early because there will be a high demand for fireworks. And so I would request, I don't know how much money you were thinking about allocating to that, but I would feel comfortable utilizing fund balance for those reasons. The other one is Chief Wright has been working on a project for himself, for us, for me, for a learning management system. So the police department does a really good job of putting out like regular bulletins and kind of training modules that you need to watch and get up to date on policies, whether internal or just regular training modules to keep up with laws and other stuff like that. But system-wide throughout the city, we don't have as robust of a system. And we think it could really help us with some of our onboarding and internal operations as well, because we would get the ability to create our own content as well, and kind of introduce people very well to this is what it's like to work for the city of Pleasant Hill. We would need an additional $7,000, I think, to be able to fully fund that in this year's budget. And then the third one that is not included but has been on my mind, and we've talked about this with the park projects on and off, has been whether we wanted to add what I'm going to call a field painting robot. I know. So
What'd you say, a
field painting robot. So right now our staff goes out, manually lines the fields, right? They prep the fields and they line the fields. And they really spend, during the summer they have 2 employees that are pretty much dedicated to that 100% of the time. So again, as technology has advanced, they're basically the ability to program it and it will go out and do the whole field for you. And then that would, instead of spending time doing that, they could go to the next one to prep, they could do additional cleaning work. And so we really saw it as a way to preserve our staff for other things and other maintenance that we may need. So Jeff, just last week, was at a conference, and he came back today and was like, $30,000 is the amount for that. So one-time expense, there probably are ongoing operational expenses, but not to the tune of $30,000 every year. We had previously been quoted 25, so that's probably an accurate number, somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 if we wanted to add that in. Otherwise, we'll keep doing it the same way with our staff. That's less time that they would have to do on other things. So those are the 3, Mayor, that are on my mind. And then it would be really if you guys have any recommendations or changes that you would like to see, but I could bring it back at the next meeting.
What I was thinking of is if you would coordinate with council to try to see if there's an evening, we could do a work session.
Yep, we can.
And just commit to budget.
Yep.
Sit, look at it. People can ask questions, go over it, and sometimes it's nice to have other people look at it and see things that I don't. So yeah, just coordinate, see if you can find that.
Yep.
And then we have more time to look at it. And if we can work that out.
I just have 2 quick questions. So your fairground improvement, does that include doing anything with the community building?
No, it does not. No.
And the bleachers, is that keeping the bleachers we have and just adding?
No, well, yes and no both. So on the north side of the rodeo arena, those are permanent bleachers. And I say the word permanent, they're not ones that we move in and out to use at multiple events throughout the fair. But they could be moved to another permanent location. The bleachers on the south side of the rodeo arena right now are actual portable bleachers. So the thought would be some of the ones then further like back in the fairgrounds that we use at our motorsports events are in worse shape than what's at the rodeo arena. So the thought would be is you would take what's at the rodeo arena and move it back to some of the motorsports events so that you're not transporting bleachers so much and moving them around, because that actually requires a lot of our staff time during the week of the fair. And so, but then what would really be coming into the rodeo arena is all brand new bleachers. So the quote that Shelby gave you for the $300,000 was just on the south side. We worked with the company, the contractor that we got our quotes from, which honestly it's a cooperative purchase, so they've already been vetted for competitive bidding. But they're working on a quote now also for the north side, so that when we packaged it together, we'd have a kind of a holistic look at what that cost would be. So we do spend quite a bit of time, both employees and volunteers, in doing bleacher repairs every single year to get them up to snuff. Honestly, we hit capacity every single year during the rodeo when it comes time to it. So we know that there's additional, with new bleachers and additional seating, we can facilitate more people safely. And that was kind of our thing, is as the rodeo has grown, we're turning people away an hour before the rodeo even starts. And our fear is yes, it is our desire to continue to grow the fair, but you also can't grow it so much that people have a bad experience and then they just stop coming back. And so, our thought of getting those, and then again, like Shelby said, if you have decent, seating, that just opens the door for significantly other uses for that area besides just the week during the county fair. So, but we're still working on some final numbers for you, because again, last week early is when we said let's, and then obviously, just with anything, the more bleachers if you do both north and south, it drives the number down, if you want to call it. They assign this is what it's costing you per seat, basically. And obviously, the more bleachers you put in, that number goes down, just with anything cost and their strength in numbers. So.
Anything else from council? Yeah, just see if we can come up with a equitable time to do that.
We can do that.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? All right. Jody.
Thank you. I just have a couple of things. Since we're getting into March, it's time for employee evaluations, so I'll be working with all the supervisors to get those set up and start on those, so we're ready for April 1st. And I'm also working on getting a loggers meeting set up for employees, since we have quite a few new employees and some that are getting close to retirement, so they're going to want to know what that benefit looks like. So I have a representative that I'm working with loggers that's going to come down and put on an informational meeting for the employees. So more info will be coming on that as well. We have some new employees in the police department that I don't think I gave information on last time. We hired 2 new officers, so I've been getting them enrolled and everything, and a new dispatcher the last few weeks. So that is it.
Missy. I'm gonna scatter around, make everybody nervous.
That's all right. So this week is this working? Yeah. Okay. This week I received a plat and a new commercial site plan for Powell Exteriors, which will be north of the new Dollar General on 7th Highway. It is under review with outside agencies as well as our engineering staff. I have completed my review and submitted that to engineers as well. The other thing you guys should be aware of, I do have 2 large cable right-of-way permits that are under review at this time. They have not been approved. These both will impact Hickory Hills. So they are currently going through that process right now. It is with engineers have reviewed, and I have submitted comments back to the applicant on those.
Amy.
Just pretty much been spending a lot of time with Shelby the last couple of weeks, so on the budget.
Jeff?
This last week, as Shelby mentioned, Josh and I got to go to the MPRA conference down in Branson. A lot of learning that took place there. Met a lot of new people and able to do some networking. Also was able to meet with a number of vendors and kind of discuss not only the P1 projects we got going on, but some upcoming items as well. The staff has been working on the Porter Pavilion for the second pavilion. They've got that framework and everything completed. It's in our shop. It's been painted. It's ready to go. And we're coordinating with Tony to get some mobile equipment to go out there tomorrow and actually set that second pavilion. So you'll be seeing some action out there. While Josh and I were away on a little training, the other two guys got to deal with their snow event, so that was fun for them. They gave us a hard time about that one. But everything went well with that. And also, flag football and volleyball schedules have been updated and populated, so those rosters are all out, and we're getting ready to start that season off.
Chief?
We had our coffee with a cop last week at Public Works. That went well. It was well attended. Thanks for Tony and his crew for letting us come out and visit with them and open their shop up. Right now we're working on a lot of administrative things. We are completely revising, and we're in our final review of the emergency operations plan that'll be forthcoming shortly, probably within the next month or so. Hope to have that in your hands sometime in April. Other than that, it's just busy.
Kyle?
We just wrapped up last weekend our father-daughter dance. We had about 200 attendees. We had some really good feedback on that, and it was a really good time. I've also been working on the Shamrock Shimmy because that's almost only 2.5 weeks away already. That's a really well-attended event, a really fun community event, so I'm excited for that. With our new logo, I have been updating our brand guidelines and getting that new logo the places it needs to be. Other than that, I've just been working on social media and getting those videos we've been recording onto the website and social media.
Maggie?
So really just keeping up with obviously our capital projects. I was able to sit with our owner's rep and learn how to do an extensive certified payroll inspection on like our contractors' work. And I'll be honest with you, even though I've done bidding and purchasing before, he provided some invaluable. So we'll be able to then continue to do that on our other projects years down the road, that honestly I was not aware of all of the things that had to be checked. So that was really good. It is pretty in-depth and time-consuming to go through all of the payroll reports for those projects, but obviously much needed. So just, again, working with Shelby and Tommy both as we work through the police design component and the animal shelter. Jeff and I did meet today with the head baseball coach and our AD via phone on like our implementation and our phasing for uses of the complex as construction continues and spring sports rolls around. So we have a pretty good handle on what that's going to look like. Obviously, we've got about another month of just once they start practicing before we then have, in essence, the general public out there for games. So we've already scheduled our meeting ahead of that first game where we'll do a walkthrough, make sure everybody's comfortable with what it is. Some of the, honestly, by the time that the game gets started, I'm going to tell you, I am really confident that obviously while it won't have a finished look because, right, we're still not going to have all the grass grown back and all of those things, the fundamental uses of the general areas that are used for high school baseball games will be done and completed. So I'm feeling pretty confident about that. As I indicated, I sent an email out over the weekend. PCC Sports is basically working, I'm not going to use the word 24 hours a day, but probably pretty close to 20 hours of every day, 7 days a week from now until really the first baseball game. So to make up for time lost of the snow and weather events that we have had.
Again, I can't honestly sing their praises enough. They are very good communicators. When we meet on Fridays, I mean, they have it all laid out. They have plans in place. And so, again, I was a little nervous, but I'm a little bit more comfortable now after our meetings and then with our meeting with Coach May today that really those things, nothing, our boys baseball team isn't really going to, have any interruptions, minus about the first few days of practice where it's nothing more than the backstop netting won't be up, but they have, I'm not going to say they don't use it because they use it, but they have a piece of equipment that helps that. I attended actually a Missouri Women Leading Government meeting last week where I got to kind of network with other women in the same, similar, and other roles with local governments around the Kansas City area. And then again, the fun monthly transportation meeting. They are looking, Shelby kind of mentioned at the last meeting, when we talked about our sidewalk project, that when we go into the scoring for that, it already feels like we're at, negative points before we even get started. So I can see where some of those conversations will still kind of be continuing to go up of what that scoring kind of dynamic looks like. It was really coming from the city of Kansas City because they feel shifted on the other side, which I'm sitting here thinking, you got 4 people, like you get 4 votes. But regardless, we continue to have a seat at the table to make sure that we're advocating for our smaller cities as necessary.
Shelby.
Okay, I'm gonna start with Tony's updates. He could not be here tonight. So the one thing that I don't love to mention are 7 highway manholes because it always gets delayed. However, his note said planning to do 7 highway manholes this week. So we have all the materials. They came in right before the snow. Obviously, with the really cold, we were not going to do them. So I have high confidence, but we may just let that one go and just the public can see that it will get done. He has a meeting tomorrow with USG regarding the 7 highway lining, and on the 7 highway lining, they were planning to start this month. Last he had heard was the week of the 17th. And then he is expecting Smyco, who's the contractor on the pump house, to have pumps this week, but we haven't heard officially. That's the piece that we're still waiting on, are these pumps. And he is still waiting on the DNR review on the 5-year plan. So there you go. Oh, I mean, it's usually a plan for 30 to 60 days for their review. So the other ones, as Nikki mentioned, the P1 projects, the ones that she forgot to mention is we get kind of a 2-week look ahead every Friday. So we kind of know what to expect. Now, obviously with cold and the snow, that changes sometimes, and they're trying to catch back up. But as of last Friday, they think turf will be going on to the the West Field. I'm gonna have to name them something different because I can't ever remember. Onto the West Field, they think turf will be going in. It was supposed to be this week. Jeff's shaking his head yes. So yes, okay. So that should occur this week. And I believe it's starting next week will be playground installs. So you will start to see a lot more. And we will have to remind people that whenever the playgrounds are up, it's still not open, but they will be there. I've seen the pictures. We have all the materials, but the contractor is slated to start the week of March 3rd. The other one that I wanted to mention is every 5 years, ISO does 2 different, I don't know what the fire district's ratings are, but on our side for building codes, they come out, they sit with our staff, they learn about what our training is, what our budgeting is, what our staff certifications are, what fire codes we're on, what building codes we have. And we did receive our ISO rating earlier today, and I am happy to report that on residential, we did receive a rating, I'm gonna call it an increase to the positive. So we went from an ISO 6 to an ISO 5 for building codes. And so it's going to be on both commercial and residential will be ISO 5. So that is a positive for our organization and will continue. We've learned some things through that conversation that we think at the next rating could put us even in a better position than we are now.
Did you get a letter that we talked about?
We have not received one.
All right, thank you.
No. So what we've only received the portion of the ISO rating that is specific to the city. We don't receive anything that is attributable to the fire department. And the fire department is what really influences a majority of the rate increases that homeowners may see. So I'm only referencing the city's building code portion. And with that, I think, my mind in the last couple weeks has really been on the budget, making sure that everything's good on that. I know I have a couple of things, still that I owe to council, and so I anticipate in the next 2 weeks, that's where the focus will be.
Council, have any questions for staff?
I just have a couple, if I can get my green light to come on. First, I want to say a big shout out to Kylie. I truly love I think you're the one doing the Public Works Wednesday. I love it. I think it's great. And I think the community likes it as well. Water leaks, are we seeing a decrease in those?
I'm staring at Amy, who does the actual water analysis. In terms, I can pull up the sheet here in just a minute. I would say Tony would disagree. It's good Tony's not here. Because I would say it feels like it to me. It's not that we don't still have them. We do. But I don't think we have had as many. I don't know that that is still reflective in what we're seeing in that decrease in that line loss that we talked about, the non-revenue water. We haven't really seen that turn a corner, which again is why that number's probably somewhere else out there. I'm trying to think. We've had
At least 2 here in February.
okay. Oh, you have it up?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's 4 small ones in January, then 2 in February so far.
Yeah, I think some of the ones we have seen have not been as large, barring 7 Highway, which
Yeah, there was
still
one
has
when it was
issues.
super cold out. We hit that first cold snap. There was one.
Off a country club that was,
That
had
was
that
bad.
huge.
That
Those
was
are
bad.
by Willow
Yeah.
or
Oh. I was just curious if it was slowing down in April.
I mean, sometimes you just don't. I don't
I
know.
probably jinxed it.
Yeah, please don't.
Wherever he is, he's not happy we're talking about it. Tell you that right now. Any other questions from council? No. All right, I need a motion to go into closed session for RSMO 610-021, 1 for legal, 2 for real estate.
I'll make a motion, we go into closed session for, was it legal actions
And real estate.
and real estate?
I'll second.
Motion a second to go into closed session for RSMO 610-021, legal, and number 2, real estate. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Augsburg,
Yes.
Councilwoman Niner,
Yes.
Councilman Newberry,
yes.
Councilman Emo.
Yes.
Okay.